Have you ever wondered what happens when a child notices what adults choose to ignore?
Daddy,
Tonight's
look at
story
her
begins
arm.
in a
Is she
quiet
okay?
restaurant, where a little girl spots something no one else dares to see: a bruise on a waitress's arm, and a truth that will change a family forever. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me, from which country and at what time are you watching this story? What if the man everyone respected was the same one who once walked past a dying soul without stopping? The framed award on Elias Mercer's mahogany disc gleamed in the late morning light. Business Leader of the Year, Summit Developments. He adjusted it, straightened the edge of a contract, and shut the drawer that held an unopened picture frame. It had been his wife's once. The glass was still clean, but he hadn't looked inside for years. Friday evenings in Colorado Springs always carried a lazy hum traffic easing down Main Street, the air rich with pine and distant wood smoke. Elias steered his Ford SUV through the gentle slope of downtown. Beside him sat Lily, 10 years old, tracing hearts on the fogged window. Her backpack jingled with crayons. "Can we stop at the diner, Dad? The one with the yellow lights?" He glanced at the clock. 15 minutes tops. I've got a conference call at 7. And the Golden Willow Diner glowed like a lantern against the twilight. Its window sign flickered open in red cursive, and a willow tree outside brushed the glass with golden leaves. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and cinnamon, an ordinary place that made strangers feel like regulars. A waitress approached, balancing plates of pancakes and bacon. "Evening, folks. What can I get for you?" Her name tag read Clara. She moved carefully, one hand steadying a small trimmer in the other. Up close, Lily noticed faint bruises along her wrist. "Did someone hurt you, ma'am?" the girl asked softly. Clara's smile faltered. "No, sweetheart, just clumsy old me." She set down the cups. Elias looked up from his phone long enough to clear his throat. "Lily, mind your manners. Eat, please." The waitress nodded and walked away. Lily frowned at her father. "You didn't even say thank you." "I left her a tip," he replied, stirring sugar into his coffee. "That's how grown-ups say thanks." Outside the window, the street lamps blinked awake one by one. Families lingered over dinner. Couples shared pie slices. To Elias, they were background noise proof of a world that moved fine without him. He read another email from the legal team, words blurring with the reflection of his own face in the screen. Lily pressed her fork into a pancake. "She looks scared, Dad," he sighed. "People make choices, honey. It's not our place." His voice wasn't sharp, only practiced, like someone repeating a rule he no longer believed. Clara passed their booth again, carrying a coffee pot. Harvey Boone, the manager, called across the counter. "Pick it up, Reyes. You're behind again." She flinched, murmured an apology. Lily's eyes widened. Elias didn't turn. When the check arrived, he slid a 20 beneath the saucer without reading the total. The tip was generous, measured, automatic, detached. Clara whispered, "Thank you." But the words dissolved under the hum of conversation. They stepped outside into the crisp air. Leaves swirled across the sidewalk, catching in the glow of the diner's neon sign. Lily clutched her sweater. She looked like she wanted to cry. "Not everyone's our problem, Lily." He opened the car door, the metallic click sounding louder than it should have. For a moment he hesitated, seeing their reflection in the windshield, his tall, tailored figure beside a small girl with questioning eyes. He almost said something softer, but the thought slipped away with the cold wind. The drive home wound through Broadmoor Bluffs. Lights from houses shimmered below like a scattered necklace. Elias loosened his tie. The silence between them felt heavier than the city spread beneath. When they reached the driveway, Lily ran inside without speaking. He stood for a moment beside the car, listening to the echo of his own footsteps against the stone path. Inside the Mercer house, the quiet was almost deliberate. The walls carried the soft tick of a grandfather clock, the hum of the refrigerator, and the faint rustle of papers from Elias's study. Everything was polished, efficient, and cold like success measured in square footage. Lily dropped her backpack by the stairs and padded toward the kitchen. "Can I draw before bed?" she asked, her voice careful. "Homework first," he said automatically, glancing up from his laptop. The blue light washed the warmth from his face. "I already did it," she murmured. "Miss Carter said we could draw something that made us feel safe." He half smiled. "Then draw this house. It's the safest place you'll ever be." But Lily only nodded, picking up her crayons and slipping away toward her room. When her door closed, Elias leaned back in his chair. His reflection in the dark window looked older than 47, hair silvering at the temples, shoulders squared by habit rather than pride. The email on his screen read reminder, Summit Development's safety audit pending. He scrolled past it. Outside, the wind carried the soft sound of a distant church bell, marking 8 o'clock. He'd heard it for years without ever noticing. In her room, Lily drew quietly on a sheet of paper. The yellow crayon broke, so she used her finger to smear the color into soft light. She drew the diner window, the golden willow outside, and the woman with bruised arms pouring coffee. Beneath it, she wrote in uneven letters, "Someone needs help." She hesitated, then added a small figure beside the woman, a man in a dark suit, walking away. When Elias came to say goodnight, she had already fallen asleep, one hand still clutching the drawing. He smiled faintly, pulled the blanket up, and switched off the lamp. On the way out, the paper slipped from her grasp and drifted onto the floor. Hours later, as he finished reviewing contracts, he noticed the sheet lying near his chair. The words were childish, crooked, yet they caught the light-like truth written in crayon. Someone needs help. He stood still for a long time. The clock ticked, the house breathed, and outside the wind moved the trees. For the first time in years, Elias felt something shift, a quiet unease, a whisper of conscience beneath the hum of achievement. He placed the drawing on his desk, smoothing its creases. The smile of the woman in the picture, Clara's tired kindness, looked back at him through the soft gold of Lily's coloring. When he finally turned off the lights, the office didn't seem as silent as before. That night, Lily left a folded drawing on his desk. A woman with bruises under a golden willow tree, captioned in a child's hand, "Someone needs help." The sunlight came early that Saturday, pouring through the wide windows of Elias Mercer's home office and landing directly on the single piece of paper lying at the center of his desk. The crayons had left a faint, waxy sheen on the surface. A woman beneath a golden willow tree, her arm bruised. A child's handwriting underneath. Someone needs help. He told himself it was just a drawing. Children made hundreds of them, little worlds of color and worry. Still, as he reached for his coffee, his eyes drifted back to the words. They seemed louder than the ticking clock. Across the hall, Lily hummed while feeding the family cat. She called out, "Dad, do you like my picture?" He hesitated before answering. "It's very good, sweetheart." She peeked in, her face bright in the morning light. "It's for you. You're supposed to keep it where you can see it." He nodded, sliding it beside his monitor. After she left, he sat down again, trying to drown in spreadsheets and numbers. Yet every few minutes, his gaze returned to that crayon sun blazing over the diner window. By noon, the office felt smaller. He opened a drawer looking for a contract and found an old file marked Parkview Tower Incident Report. For a moment, he didn't remember putting it there. A decade had passed since the accident. The report's paper smelled of dust and ink. Worker, deceased Miguel Reyes. Elias closed the folder sharply. He had forgotten that name. Or maybe he had tried to. The memory flickered. A call during a board meeting. A foreman's voice saying, "There's been a collapse." He had signed the release forms the next day without reading the last page. Profits had climbed, so had his reputation. But somewhere inside that stack of achievements lay a buried sound, the echo of falling steel. He rose abruptly, grabbed his jacket, and told his assistant through the intercom, "I'll be out for a couple of hours." The streets of Colorado Springs were calm. The peaks of Pikes Peak dusted with snow. The Golden Willow Diner appeared ahead, its neon sign blinking softly in daylight. Open breakfast all day. Inside, the smell of coffee and buttered toast greeted him like an old hymn. Clara was behind the counter refilling sugar jars. When she noticed him, surprise flickered across her face. "Back so soon, Mr. Mercer?" He managed a polite smile. "Thought I'd try the pie everyone keeps talking about." She laughed, cautious but kind. "Cherry's best before noon." "I'm?" Harvey Boone appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Always nice to see folks like you around, sir." he said with oily warmth. Then, almost possessively, he rested a hand on Clara's shoulder. "Clara, don't forget table 4. She stiffened. "Yes, Mr. Boone." Elias's eyes narrowed. "You run a tight ship here," he said evenly. "Gotta keep standards," Harvey replied, the corners of his mouth tight. "People don't learn unless you remind them who's in charge." "Oh?" Clara excused herself, slipping away with the tray. The brief tremor in her hand was back. Elias ate in silence. The cherry pie was sweet but hollow on his tongue. Outside, a gust of wind bent the willow branches, scattering golden leaves along the window like falling coins, for reasons he couldn't name. Guilt rose with every bite. When he paid, he left cash on the counter. Harvey picked it up with a grin. "Generous tip, Mr. Mercer." Elias met his eyes. "Consider it a reminder kindness doesn't cost you authority." He turned toward the door, and for the first time, Clara looked at him not as a customer, but with something like recognition of another human being trying, clumsily, to care. As he stepped into the sunlight, the bell above the door chimed once, clear and small, like a memory trying to be heard. Elias paused on the sidewalk, the bell's fading echo tangled with the rustle of willow leaves. The day was bright, yet everything around him felt subdued, as if the light itself had softened out of respect. He walked toward his car, his reflection gliding along the diner's glass windows. Inside, Clara was smiling faintly as she poured coffee for a young couple. From this distance, her bruises were invisible, but he still saw them. Driving back through downtown, the steady hum of traffic could not drown out the small voice that kept circling his mind. Someone needs help. He turned off the radio, letting silence fill the car. For the first time in years, that silence felt heavy. Back in his office, he sat before the large window overlooking the city. The skyline glittered, crisp and confident. Somewhere beneath those rooftops, people like Clara carried trays, worked long shifts, lived quietly with pain he'd never cared to notice. He pressed his fingertips against the glass, seeing his own reflection layered over the city's distant tower's success superimposed on fragility. He reached again for the Parkview Tower incident report. This time, he read every line. Miguel Reyes, age 32. Fatal fall due to structural failure. Survived by wife, Clara Reyes, and infant daughter, Maya. The words blurred. 10 years. He whispered the name as if testing the sound. Reyes. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Mercer, you still want me to file the old safety reports for archiving?" He hesitated. "No," he said slowly. "Keep them open for now." The assistant's pause carried a hint of surprise. "Yes, sir." He turned in his chair, catching sight of Lily's drawing taped to the corner of his desk. The crayon willow seemed almost to move in the afternoon light. He stared at it until the shadows from the leaves outside began to ripple across the paper like waves. A memory surfaced the day after the accident. The foreman, Hank, had stood outside his office door, hard hat in hand, voice trembling. "Sir, we should review the blueprints again," and Elias had interrupted. "The insurance will cover it. Let's move forward." He remembered the click of the door closing and how quiet it had been afterward. Now that same quiet pressed against him, insistent and alive. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through old contacts, until he found a number marked Hank Foreman, Rhett. His thumb hovered, then stopped. He wasn't ready, not yet. Evening came early, painting the streets in orange and pink. He drove past the diner once more, the lights now glowing against the dimming sky. Through the window, he could see Clara counting receipts, her daughter sitting in a corner booth drawing on a napkin. The child's small hand moved with the same focused grace as Lily's. He didn't go in. He only watched until the diner's neon sign buzzed and flickered to life again. The Golden Willow Diner Open. Something in him shifted, quiet but irreversible. The guilt that had once been a faint shadow now took form, and with it, a decision he didn't yet understand. When he finally returned home, the house greeted him with the same stillness, but it no longer felt like peace. It felt like absence. He set his briefcase down and noticed the drawing again on the desk, now illuminated by the lamp's soft circle of light. The child's handwriting seemed to glow against the paper, each letter uneven, trembling. Someone needs help. He sat down slowly, whispering to no one. Maybe it's my turn. As he spoke, his phone buzzed. A voicemail icon blinked. One new message. He played it. Lily's cheerful voice filled the quiet room. "Daddy, did you help her yet?" He froze, listening to the small click as the message ended. The question hung there, as steady as a heartbeat. Outside, the wind stirred through the willows again, their golden leaves brushing against the window pane like a whisper demanding an answer. The next Monday began with the smell of rain and paper. Inside the glass-walled boardroom of Summit Developments, the hum of a projector mixed with the shuffle of contracts. Elias Mercer sat at the head of the table, the faint gray of dawn still clinging to his suit. While his team spoke about profit margins, his mind kept circling a single word from the old report, Reyes. "Sir, you wanted to review the Midtown project?" his assistant prompted. He blinked. "Yes, Midtown." His voice was calm, but his pulse wasn't. As the charts flickered on the screen, he saw only blueprints, lines crossing, beams overlapping, spaces that once promised safety. He excused himself before the meeting ended, claiming a call from investors. Outside, the clouds hung low over Colorado Springs, tinting the streets silver. He dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A rough voice answered, "Hank Williams speaking." "Hank, it's Elias Mercer." A pause. "Well, I'll be damned. Didn't expect to hear that name again. I need to ask about Parkview Tower." The line went quiet except for the static hiss of distance. Finally, Hank said, "What's to ask? It's built, it's still standing, and a good man isn't." Elias's throat tightened. "I just need to understand what happened." "You understood back then," Hank replied. "You signed off and told us to move on. Some of us tried not to." Elias closed his eyes. "I was wrong." Another silence. Then Hank sighed. "Meet me at the site after hours. Still keeps me up some nights." And friend. By evening, the rain had stopped, leaving the steel bones of Parkview Tower shining under the streetlights. Elias parked nearby, the air smelling of wet asphalt and pine. The building rose above him, his monument to progress. Yet near the side fence, a small patch of wildflowers clung to the earth, planted around a rusted plaque. "In memory of Miguel Reyes, 1986, 2013. Hank waited beside a pickup, gray hair damp beneath his cap. "Funny thing," he said, nodding toward the plaque. "City wanted to take it down last year for renovations. Folks from the diner brought flowers instead." Elias stared at the name until the letters blurred. He remembered the press release, the careful words about unforeseeable circumstances. He had written them himself. "Tell me, Hank," he asked quietly. "Was it preventable?" Hank hesitated. "We warned the office about weak welds. If the order had been delayed a week, the platform wouldn't have given way." The words fell like stones. Elias could almost hear the echo of that collapse, the metallic scream of failure, and beneath it, a man's shout cut short. "I didn't know," Elias whispered. Hank's gaze was steady. "You didn't want to." They stood in the hush of evening, traffic murmuring far away. At last, Hank touched the brim of his cap. "Guess you came here looking for ghosts, Elias. Just remember, they don't disappear until you do something about them." When Hank drove off, Elias remained beside the plaque. The city lights shimmered on puddles, turning them into small mirrors. In each reflection, he saw the same thing, his own face looking back through time. Elias drove back through the sleeping city, the tires hissing on wet pavement. The tower's reflection followed him in every puddle, a silver ghost rising behind his headlights. When he reached his office, the building's lobby smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee, the way all ambition did after midnight. He turned on the desk lamp. Its small circle of light fell over scattered files, and the child's drawing still taped to the corner of the monitor. The crayon willow shimmered faintly, as if the tree itself had something to say. He pulled the Parkview Tower blueprint from a cabinet and unrolled it across the desk. Thin blue lines crossed like veins, leading toward the spot labeled Load Platform C. His hand hovered there. 10 years ago, he had called that line a minor correction. He had approved the weld schedule anyway. And a man had died. The air conditioning clicked on, whispering through the vents like breath through an empty house. Elias pressed his palms flat on the paper until the edges crinkled. Then he whispered, "I knew his name." He sat back, staring at the window where rain had started again, gentle now, tapping against the glass like a polite insistence. He remembered Clara's quiet voice at the diner, the way she'd flinched when Boone touched her arm, the photo behind the counter. A smiling man in a yellow vest, Summit Developments, printed across his chest. His phone buzzed with a message from the finance division. Quarterly audit, ready for approval. He closed it without replying. Somewhere inside him, the line between the man who built towers and the man who walked past broken people began to blur. He opened his notebook and wrote a single sentence. Find out what really happened. Then he underlined it twice. Outside, the streetlights dimmed under fog. He switched off the lamp but couldn't make himself leave. The blueprint lay open, a map of both success and sin. In the dark, the pale ink glowed like bones underwater. He closed his eyes and saw again the wildflowers at the base of the tower, the name Miguel Reyes carved into rust. When he opened them, the city beyond the glass seemed different, less certain, more alive. A faint vibration startled him, the phone lighting up with a voicemail. He hit play. Lily's voice, small and bright, filled the room. "Daddy, did you help her yet?" He didn't move. The rain kept time against the window, a soft rhythm echoing the question. In the reflection of the glass, he saw himself the award-winning builder staring back from a house of silence. He whispered to the empty office, "Not yet, sweetheart, but I will." The words hung there, fragile and real, until the lamp flickered and went out. The following evening, Elias Mercer found himself once again parked in front of the Golden Willow Diner. The place looked smaller under the soft glow of its neon sign, like a memory shrinking into focus. The rain had stopped, but the pavement still glistened, reflecting the golden light that leaked through the diner's windows. Inside, the usual hum of small-town life filled the air, coffee cups clinking, laughter rising from a booth, the low tune of Blue Moon humming through the radio. He took a slow breath before stepping inside. The familiar smell of coffee and fried bacon clung to the air, comforting and ordinary. He almost felt like an intruder in that comfort. Clara was there, her hair pulled back neatly, the faint bruises on her arm fading into the soft light. She noticed him immediately, surprise flashing before she forced a polite smile. "Evening, Mr. Mercer," she said, balancing a tray of pie slices. "Back for dinner?" "Something like that," he replied, sliding into an empty booth. "Thought I'd try the coffee this time." She nodded, poured him a cup, and set it down gently. "Careful, it's fresh off the pot." Her voice trembled, just a little, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Elias noticed her hands. They were the kind of hands that had learned to move quickly, to serve without complaint, to hide tremors. From behind the counter, Harvey Boone barked, "Clara, those refills won't pour themselves." His voice carried over the chatter, sharp enough to cut through the soft music. She stiffened. "Right away, Mr. Boone." Elias's jaw tightened. "That's no way to speak to your staff," he said quietly. Harvey turned, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, it's just diner talk, Mr. Mercer." "Folks here don't take offense." "Seems one of us just did," Elias replied, his tone calm but heavy. For a moment, the hum of conversation died. A man at the counter looked over his newspaper. A woman in the corner lowered her fork. The room waited. Harvey's smirk faltered. "Didn't mean any harm," he muttered. "Some people just need a firmer hand." Clara glanced between them, uneasy. Elias held her gaze for a heartbeat, then turned back to his coffee. "Respect doesn't need a hand," he said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, the diner returned to its rhythm, the clink of silverware, the murmur of voices. But something in the air had changed. Clara returned with a slice of pie. "You didn't have to do that," she said, setting the plate down. "Do what?" he asked, though he already knew. "Speak up," she said. "People usually just watch." He gave a small smile. "Maybe I've watched long enough." Her lips parted, as if to say something, but Harvey called from the back again, and she hurried away. Elias ate slowly, watching her move from table to table. She reminded him of the men and women who'd built his towers, people who carried the weight of the world so others could stand taller. And he, for years, had never seen them. When his check arrived, he placed a folded envelope beneath it, cash for the meal, and something extra. On the outside, he wrote, "For repairs." Clara noticed it as she cleared the table. Mr. Mercer, this is too much. He shook his head. You'll find a use for it. She looked at him, unsure whether to thank him or question him. In the end, she just said, "Good night." He rose, buttoned his coat, and walked toward the door. The bell above it chimed softly, one clear note that lingered longer than usual. Outside, the night was still, the willow branches swaying gently under the street lamp. He turned once, glancing through the glass at the warm light inside, and for a brief moment he saw something like peace, ordinary people eating pie, sharing stories, laughing softly, a life he had forgotten to live. Then a shadow moved near the counter. Harvey Boone picked up the envelope, smirked and slipped it into his jacket pocket before turning toward the kitchen. Elias didn't see it. He was already walking down Main Street, the wind tugging at his coat. Somewhere behind him, the neon sign buzzed, its red glow flickering like a heartbeat in the dark. The next night, the air carried a chill that hinted at early winter. Elias returned to the Golden Willow Diner near closing time. The crowd had thinned to a few locals nursing late coffees, their laughter low and familiar. Through the window, he saw Clara wiping down the counter, her movements slow but steady. Harvey Boone leaned in the doorway to the kitchen, arms folded, his grin sharp enough to cut. When Elias stepped inside, the bell gave its usual soft chime. Clara straightened in surprise.
"Mr. Mercer, did you forget something?"
"Just checking in," he said, sliding into the same booth as before. "I had some time to spare." Harvey approached, his smile fixed. "Evening again, Mr. Mercer. Word around town is you've taken quite a liking to our little diner." Elias met his gaze. "It's the kind of place that reminds you what matters." "Sure," Harvey said. "And some of us have to work to keep it that way." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I'd be careful with those charity gestures, though. Folks might get the wrong idea." Elias didn't flinch. "Which folks?" Harvey's grin widened. "Oh, small towns talk. A man like you, sitting here late, leaving cash under a lady's check, well, people start assuming you've got a soft spot." He expected embarrassment or anger. Instead, Elias's expression didn't change. "Maybe I do," he said quietly, "but not for rumors." The smile slipped from Harvey's face. "You think money gives you the right to lecture me about respect?" "I think character does," Elias replied. The silence that followed was thicker than smoke. A couple in the corner exchanged nervous glances. Clara stepped forward.
"Mr. Boone, please."
But Harvey snapped, "Stay out of this." Elias rose slowly, buttoning his coat. "No, she won't. Not this time." His voice was steady, but there was steel beneath the calm. "You're done talking to her that way." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Harvey gave a short, brittle laugh. "You don't own this diner, Mr. Mercer." "Not yet," Elias said. "But that can change." The words landed like a challenge. Harvey's eyes darkened, but Elias was already walking toward the door. He paused on the threshold, turning just enough to speak over his shoulder. "I built towers once, Mr. Boone. I can rebuild better things, too." Then he left, the bell chiming behind him, a clean, cutting sound that felt like a closing chapter. Inside, Harvey stood still for several seconds, jaw tight. Finally, he pulled out his phone, fingers tapping fast. "Yeah," he said into it, his voice low and mean. "You'll want to hear this. Mercer's sniffing around, playing hero for one of my waitresses. Big story, if you make it sound right." Clara froze, the rag slipping from her hand. She turned toward him, eyes wide, but Harvey was already retreating to the back office, muttering into the phone. Outside, Elias walked down Main Street toward his car, unaware of the storm being born behind him. The neon glow of the diner flickered on the wet pavement like a warning light. He looked back once at the window, at the golden willow bending above it, and felt a strange calm, as if he'd done one thing right in a lifetime of mistakes. But as the wind picked up, the diner's sign buzzed and dimmed, and somewhere in the darkness, a rumor began to take its first breath. Morning came with the soft hum of rain against the glass windows of the Golden Willow Diner. The town of Maplebrook looked washed clean, its streets slick with silver light, but inside the diner the air was thick with whispers. People leaned close over steaming mugs, voices lowered but urgent, like a secret no one wanted to keep. "Did you hear?" someone murmured at the counter. "They say Elias Mercer's been seeing that waitress after hours." "No kidding? The one with the bruises?" Well, she doesn't look hurt now, does she? Each word floated through the air like the hiss of frying bacon, impossible to ignore. Clara kept her eyes down, refilling cups, pretending not to hear. Her hands moved automatically, pour, smile, nod, but her stomach twisted tighter with every fragment of conversation. She'd faced whispers before, but never like this. These had teeth. By mid-morning, the diner was full. Harvey Boone worked the register with exaggerated cheer, greeting everyone like a man who owned both the building and the story inside it. When Clara passed, he murmured, "Careful, sweetheart. People are watching how close you stand to certain customers." Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. She just set the coffee pot down and stepped into the back hallway to breathe. The small staff room smelled of soap and cigarette smoke. She sat on a crate of napkins, pressing her hands together to stop them shaking. The old clock ticked above the door. "They'll believe what they want," she told herself. "It'll pass like it always does." But it didn't. At the same moment across town, Elias Mercer sat in his office on the 12th floor of the Mercer & Co. building. His assistant, Mark, entered with a cautious look. "Sir, there's something you should see." And he placed a tablet on the desk. The headline glared back in bold type, "Billionaire Developer Seen with Diner Waitress Affair or Charity." Beneath it, a grainy photo. Elias leaving the diner at night. Clara in the doorway behind him, the neon light painting their faces gold. Elias's throat went dry. "Where did this come from?" "Local gossip site, sir. It's spreading fast." He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The words on the screen blurred together. Affair, scandal, waitress, power imbalance. He'd seen stories like this before, usually about other men. He'd always told himself he was different. Mark hesitated. "Do you want me to contact legal?" "No," Elias said. "Let them talk for now." Mark frowned. "You're just going to let it sit?" "Sometimes," Elias said quietly. "The storm tells you who your friends are." The phone rang. It was Clara. Her voice shook. "Mr. Mercer, they're saying terrible things. I don't know what to do. My daughter's teacher asked questions this morning. People are—" He cut in gently. "Clara, listen to me. None of this is your fault. I shouldn't have talked to you. I shouldn't—" "Stop," he said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. I'll handle this." A pause. Then, softer. "How?" Elias didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted to the photo of his late wife on the wall, smiling beside a half-built tower. "By not running," he said finally. "By telling the truth when it matters." When the call ended, he stared out the window. Below, Maplebrook stretched in shades of gray and silver, a town that believed everything it read. He knew Harvey Boone was behind this. The man had control of the rumor mill now, turning decency into currency. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the hills. At lunchtime, Elias returned to the diner. Every head turned as the bell above the door rang. Clara froze mid-step, the coffee pot trembling in her hand. Harvey grinned from behind the counter, his voice smooth and mocking. "Back for another free refill, Mr. Mercer?" Elias ignored him, speaking softly to Clara. "Can we talk?" She glanced around at the watching faces. "Not here," she whispered. "Then somewhere else," he said. "You deserve to be heard." She hesitated, then nodded slightly. Harvey's smirk widened. "Well, isn't that sweet? Taking the lady out for a private meeting now?" The diner chuckled, small, cruel laughs rippling like cold water. Clara flinched, eyes glistening. Elias turned to Harvey. "Enjoy your audience," he said, his voice calm but razor-sharp. "It's the last one you'll have for a while." He guided Clara toward the door. Outside, the clouds broke open, rain spilling across the street in a sudden downpour. The two of them stood beneath the awning silent, soaked in half-light, while behind them, the laughter faded into whispers again. In that fragile silence, Elias finally said, "They'll keep talking until the truth makes more noise." Clara met his eyes, trembling. "And if it never does? Then we make it louder." The rain drummed harder against the roof, like 100 quiet hands applauding a promise neither of them knew how to keep. By evening, the rain had stopped, but the town hadn't quieted. What began as whispers over coffee had turned into headlines. Screens in every diner booth, every gas station, every living room flickered with the same smiling face, Harvey Boone. sitting across from a reporter on Channel 8 News. "I don't want to speak ill of anyone," Harvey began, his tone humble, his grin rehearsed. "But when you see a powerful man visiting your diner night after night, leaving money, whispering to one of your waitresses, it makes you wonder what kind of help he's offering." The reporter leaned forward. "Are you suggesting an inappropriate relationship?" Harvey sighed, like a man burdened by truth. "I'm saying appearances matter. Folks around here respect decency. Maybe Mr. Mercer forgot that." The clip spread like wildfire. Within hours, the video had thousands of views, shared with captions dripping in judgment. Clara sat alone in her small apartment, the TV's light washing her face pale. Her daughter, Emma, slept in the next room clutching a stuffed bear. The phone on the counter buzzed unknown numbers, voicemail she didn't want to hear. She muted it and pressed her palms to her eyes. Her name was out there now, not just whispered but written, recorded, consumed. The waitress and the millionaire. She could almost hear her mother's voice from years ago, worn and wise. People love to drag others down when they're scared to climb. A knock sounded on the door. She froze. "Who is it?" "It's Elias." When she opened the door, he stood there, drenched again from the storm that seemed to follow him everywhere. His expression was grave, but his voice was gentle. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." Clara stepped aside wordlessly. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender, soap, and old books. Elias noticed a photo on the wall. Clara, younger, standing beside a man in a construction vest. He recognized the logo instantly. Summit Developments, his own company. He drew a slow breath. "Your husband worked for me." Clara looked down. "Yes, Miguel Reyes. He died in that tower collapse 10 years ago." Silence hung between them, heavy and raw. Elias felt something twist deep inside. "I didn't know you didn't want to know," she whispered. "No one did. They said it was an accident, that he shouldn't have been there that late." He nodded slowly, shame rising in his chest. "They said the same thing to me. I believed them." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Clara said, "I don't care what people think of me, Mr. Mercer. But I have a daughter. She's 6. I can't let her grow up being pointed at." Elias met her eyes. "You won't. I'll make sure of that." She gave a small, broken laugh. "How? You can't stop gossip. Place. No," he said softly. "But I can stop the man feeding it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Tomorrow morning there'll be a press conference at my office. I'm going to tell the truth about the diner, about you, about what really happened at Parkview Tower." Clara's eyes widened. "That'll ruin you." "Maybe," Elias said, "but it might save something worth more." She searched his face, looking for doubt, and found none. Just a weary determination, the look of a man finally done hiding behind his own walls. Outside, thunder rumbled again over the hills. Elias moved toward the door, turning back only once. "Be ready for tomorrow. Everything changes then." When the door closed, Clara pressed her hand to her chest. The rain had started again, faint and persistent. She walked to the window and watched it fall across Maplebrook, washing away the dust from rooftops and signs. For the first time in years, she felt that maybe the storm wasn't meant to destroy it, was meant to clean. But down the road, in a darkened bar, Harvey Boone watched the same rain from his stool, a glass of whiskey sweating in his grip. He smiled when the news replayed his interview. "Enjoy your truth, Mercer," he muttered. "Let's see who believes it." Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, brief, blinding, and full of warning. The morning sun rose pale over Maplebrook, slipping through the glass facade of Mercer & Co. like light entering a cathedral. By 8 o'clock, the small square outside the building was crowded with reporters, microphones, and flashing cameras. The air buzzed with anticipation, everyone waiting to see whether the man at the center of the scandal would finally speak. Inside, Elias Mercer stood before the mirror in his office, adjusting his tie with deliberate calm. He had slept little, but his mind was clearer than it had been in years. The reflection staring back was older than the one he remembered, a man worn down not by age, but by silence. Lily's voice from his last voicemail still echoed faintly in his head. "Daddy, did you help her yet?" He looked down at the papers on his desk, the official statement he had written overnight. It wasn't polished, not like the corporate press releases he used to sign. It was raw, Honest. It was human. Mark, his assistant, entered quietly. "They're ready for you, sir. Press is setting up outside." Elias nodded. "Clara?" "She's here," Mark said, glancing toward the hallway. "But she's nervous." Clara stepped into the office, wearing a plain navy dress. The fatigue in her eyes couldn't hide her resolve. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly. "I've been sure about very few things in my life," Elias replied. "This is one of them." They walked together to the building's entrance, where the glass doors opened to a storm of flashbulbs. Questions flew instantly. "Mr. Mercer, is the rumor true? Are you protecting this woman? Is this about guilt over the tower collapse?" Elias raised a hand. "Please, let me speak." The noise died down to a hush. He stepped up to the microphone, the morning wind tugging at his suit jacket. 10 years ago, he began, his voice low but steady. "A man named Miguel Reyes died working on one of my construction sites. He was a husband, a father, and a man who trusted the company he worked for. That company was mine." Cameras clicked. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "At the time, I accepted the official report that called it an accident," he continued. "But I never looked closer. I was too busy protecting profits, reputation, everything except the truth. I've carried that silence for 10 years. He glanced toward Clara, standing a few steps away, her hands clasped tight. "Recently, I met someone who reminded me that silence can wound deeper than lies. Clara Reyes didn't ask for my help, but she deserved my honesty." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the rows of reporters. "There was no affair, no scandal, only a man trying too late to make things right." The wind caught his words and carried them, light but unshakable. Behind him, Mark watched, jaw set with pride. Clara lowered her gaze, tears slipping quietly down her cheek. For a moment, even the cameras seemed to still. Elias continued, "I am reopening the investigation into Miguel Reyes's death, and I am funding a community scholarship in his name for workers' families, for children who've lost what should never have been taken. And for those who believe one mistake defines them forever, let this be proof that it doesn't have to." The crowd was silent. Then came a few claps, hesitant at first, then stronger. The sound spread, echoing across the plaza. Elias exhaled, the weight of years leaving his chest like smoke. But just as the applause swelled, a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Mr. Mercer?" He turned. Harvey Boone stood at the edge of the crowd, holding up his phone. Touching speech. "But isn't it convenient how this confession happens right after your so-called scandal? Maybe guilt sells better than charity." "Yeah." Reporters turned their cameras toward Harvey. Murmurs rose again. Clara stiffened, her breath catching. Elias met Harvey's gaze calm, unflinching. "Maybe it does," he said softly. "But at least I'm selling the truth." Harvey's smirk faltered. The crowd surged with new questions, lights flashing faster now. Clara stepped back, clutching her purse, her heart pounding. Elias looked out at the reporters once more. "This story isn't about me," he said. "It's about the people who keep our town standing, the ones no one thanks. If you're going to write something, write that." He stepped away from the microphone. The noise followed him like a wave. But somewhere above the crowd, the church bell struck 9, steady, clear, unbothered. By late afternoon, the plaza was empty, the crowd's echoes fading into the hush of falling leaves. Reporters packed up their cameras, and trucks rolled away down Main Street. Inside the glass building, Elias watched the last of them go from his office window. The light was soft now, golden, forgiving. For the first time in years, he felt lighter, even if he didn't yet feel free. Then the phone rang. Mark's voice came through, strained. "Sir, you'd better turn on Channel 8. Elias reached for the remote. The screen flickered to life. Harvey Boone, standing before the diner, microphone in hand. The sign of the golden willow glowing behind him like a crown. "I'm not sure why Mr. Mercer wants to drag my name into his guilt," Harvey said smoothly, his eyes gleaming with false humility. "But he should know that charity doesn't buy innocence. The man's manipulating a poor widow to clean up his conscience. I only told the truth." Elias clenched his jaw. A poor widow. The words made Clara sound like an ornament, a symbol for pity instead of a person. The broadcast cut to an image of the diner's window, where a handmade sign now read, "No reporters." No comments. People were already gathering outside, phones in hand. Elias turned off the TV and grabbed his coat. By the time he reached the diner, the crowd had grown. The low murmur of curiosity mixed with the faint click of phone cameras. Clara stood behind the counter, her face pale, but composed. Emma clung to her skirt, confused and frightened. When Elias entered, the bell rang, once sharp, defiant. Conversations stopped. "Mr. Mercer," Clara whispered, eyes wide. "You shouldn't be here. It's making things worse." He shook his head. "No. It's time people saw the truth for themselves." Harvey emerged from the kitchen, his grin brittle. "Well, look who's back for another headline." "I didn't come for you," Elias said. "I came for her, and for what's right." He turned toward the diners, his voice steady. "You've all heard stories, half-truths, gossip. But here's what's real. 10 years ago, my company failed a man who died doing honest work. His wife, this woman, was left to raise a child alone. And instead of helping her, I ignored her existence. That's the only scandal worth talking about." The room fell utterly silent. A fork clinked against a plate. Outside, the wind sighed through the golden willow branches. Elias continued. "You want a story? Write this one down. Decency doesn't expire, and guilt only matters if it leads to change." Clara looked at him, tears glimmering but unshed. Emma reached out, tiny fingers gripping her mother's hand. Harvey tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "You think anyone's buying that speech?" Elias faced him. "Maybe not, but I'm not selling it." For a heartbeat, their eyes locked, one man feeding on power, the other slowly reclaiming his soul. Then Elias turned to leave. Outside, the wind had picked up again, swirling the fallen leaves across the parking lot. Clara followed him to the door, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." She hesitated. "They'll come after you now. All of them." He looked at her, the faintest smile touching his tired face. "Then they'll have to stand in line." As he walked toward his car, he heard a small voice behind him, Emma's calling softly through the open door. "Mommy, is he the man who built the big buildings?" Clara knelt beside her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Yes," she whispered, "but today, he built something better." Elias stopped halfway down the sidewalk, the wind lifting his coat like a flag. He didn't turn, but his eyes closed, and for the first time in a decade, he let himself breathe. The bell above the diner door rang again, faint and steady, the sound of a place, and a man learning how to start over. Autumn deepened over Maplebrook. The days shortened, the air turned crisp, and the willow outside the diner shed the last of its gold. It had been a week since Elias Mercer's public confession. The story had spread beyond town, carried by news anchors and morning talk shows. Some called him courageous, others called him desperate. But in the quiet corners of Maplebrook, people simply began to see him no longer a name in the headlines, but a man walking among them. He came to the diner most mornings now, not for coffee, but to repair what had been broken. The first time, he'd helped fix a leaky pipe under the sink. The next day, he replaced a broken sign bulb. Harvey Boone hadn't returned since the press debacle. Word was he'd sold his half of the diner and moved 2 towns over. For the first time in years, the Golden Willow belonged fully to Clara. That morning, she poured Elias a cup of coffee without asking. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said softly. "I know," he replied, taking a sip. "That's why I want to." They sat at the counter after the breakfast rush, the place warm and still. Outside, the town square bustled with life again, kids heading to school, a busker tuning his guitar, the smell of cinnamon rolls drifting from the bakery. Life had resumed its rhythm, but between them lay an unfinished quiet. Clara broke it first. "You said you'd reopen the investigation into Miguel's death." "I did," Elias said. "The inspectors found the welding subcontractor falsified the safety reports. He's facing charges." She nodded, eyes glistening. 10 years too late. I know," Elias murmured. "And I'm sorry doesn't seem big enough for that." She looked at him for a long time, studying his face. "Do you believe people can really change, Mr. Mercer?" He hesitated. "I think they have to. Otherwise, we spend our lives building taller walls to keep the guilt out." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Miguel used to say something like that. He said, When a wall falls, maybe it's just making room for light. Lad. Elias lowered his eyes, overcome by a strange ache, a mixture of gratitude and grief. He sounded like a man who understood more than most of us ever do. He did, Clara said. And he'd have liked you. Not the old you, maybe, but this one. The bell above the door jingled, and Lily burst in, her cheeks pink from the cold. Dad, she said, waving a paper. Guess what? I drew something for you. Elias smiled. Another masterpiece? She climbed onto the stool beside him and spread the paper out. It was a drawing of the diner, the golden willow outside, Clara behind the counter, and Elias fixing the sign with a ladder. Above it, she'd written, "We can make things better." Clara covered her mouth, a soft laugh escaping. "She's got your stubborn streak," she said. Elias chuckled. "And her mother's heart." Oh? For a moment, the three of them sat in an easy silence, surrounded by the hum of the diner, the hiss of the coffee pot, the soft clatter of plates. Outside, the willow's last leaves drifted to the ground, golden against the gray. Then the door opened again. An older man stepped in, wearing a brown coat and a news cap. His eyes flicked between Elias and Clara. "You Elias Mercer?" Elias rose slowly. "Yes." The man nodded once. "I worked with Miguel. Name's Luis Ortega. I was there the night he stopped, swallowed hard. "He was my friend. I came to thank you for telling the truth." Clara blinked in surprise. "You knew Miguel?" Luis smiled faintly. "Everybody knew Miguel. He was the kind of man who'd give you half his lunch if you forgot yours." His gaze shifted to Elias. "He used to say, 'The boss doesn't see us, but maybe someday he will.' Guess he was right." Elias's throat tightened. "I wish it hadn't taken so long." Luis nodded. "Better late than never, Mr. Mercer. He'd forgive you. He was good at that." The words landed like a benediction. For a moment, the whole diner seemed to hold its breath. Clara turned away, wiping her eyes. Lily's drawing fluttered on the counter, a small burst of color in a world still healing. Outside, the wind picked up again, swirling the fallen leaves down Main Street. Inside, the air felt lighter, as though something long buried had finally exhaled. The cemetery sat on a quiet hill outside Maplebrook, where the autumn wind carried the scent of pine and distant rain. Clara walked slowly between the rows of weathered stones, a small bouquet of white lilies trembling in her hand. Elias and Lily followed a few steps behind, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. They stopped at a simple granite marker etched with the words, "Miguel Reyes, 1986, 2013. He built with his hands and loved with his heart." "Oh." Clara knelt, brushing away fallen leaves from the base. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Elias took off his hat, his voice low. "I've been to 1,000 groundbreakings, but never one that felt like this. The foundations I laid back then, they weren't strong enough to carry the weight of a man's life." Clara looked up, her eyes calm but glistening.
You can stop carrying the guilt, Mr. Mercer. Miguel wouldn't want you to live in punishment.
He believed in second chances he gave them, even when they weren't deserved. Lily crouched beside her, curious. "Mom, is this the man who helped build the tall building?" Clara smiled faintly. "Yes, sweetheart. And this man," she nodded toward Elias, "is helping make sure people like him are never forgotten." Elias's throat tightened. He reached into his coat pocket and unfolded a small piece of paper. It was Lily's drawing the diner, the willow, the people smiling under golden light. He placed it gently at the foot of the grave. The colors fluttered in the wind. "I used to think legacy meant skyscrapers," he said softly. "Now I think it's the people who stand because of you." They stood in silence as the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain through the trees. The sun slipped behind a bank of clouds, and a single ray of light broke through, falling across the stone. Clara whispered a quiet prayer in Spanish, words carried away by the breeze. Elias didn't understand them, but he didn't need to. The tone said everything: gratitude, sorrow, release. As they turned to leave, Clara paused. "You've done more than most men would." "I didn't do it for forgiveness," Elias said. "I did it because I finally understood what it costs not to care." Clara smiled gently. "That's what forgiveness is, Mr. Mercer. Understanding." They walked back toward the car, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. Halfway down the hill, Lily stopped and looked back at the grave. "Mom," she said softly, "do you think he can see us?" Clara knelt, tucking Lily's hair behind her ear. "Yes, I think he can, and I think he's smiling." Elias stood a few steps away, watching them, mother and child, silhouetted against the setting Sunday. For the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider in their story. He felt like part of something that was finally being rebuilt, not a tower, but a family. When they reached the car, Clara opened the passenger door, then hesitated. "Would you like to come by for dinner? It's not much, but you've earned a place at the table." Elias's smile was quiet, genuine. "I'd like that." As they drove back into town, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall light, uncertain, like forgiveness itself. Behind them, the wind stirred through the pines, rustling the small drawing at the foot of the grave. The crayon willow tree shimmered faintly under the thin veil of snow, a child's promise kept. Winter arrived softly that year, wrapping Maplebrook in a hush of snow and light. The town looked like something out of memory, chimneys smoking, wreaths hanging from wooden doors, the faint sound of bells drifting through the air. In the middle of Main Street, the Golden Willow Diner glowed like a lantern against the pale white afternoon. Inside, the warmth was alive with the smell of cinnamon and coffee. Clara moved easily behind the counter, her laughter no longer careful, her eyes no longer wary. The diner had changed since Harvey Boone's departure. Locals who once whispered now came to sit a little longer, to talk a little softer, to leave notes of kindness under their plates. The story that had once divided them had somehow drawn them closer. At the corner booth sat Elias Mercer, reading from a folder of scholarship applications. He looked different now, not younger, but lighter. The weight that had once bent his shoulders seemed to have found a new place to rest, in purpose, not regret. "Refills, Mr. Mercer?" Clara asked, teasing gently. He smiled. "You know, I think you've called me that long enough." She laughed. Old habits die hard. From the kitchen came a burst of giggles. Lily and Emma were decorating gingerbread cookies at a side table, their aprons dusted with flour and joy. "Dad, look!" Lily called out. "Ours is a tower, but with hearts on top." Elias grinned. "That's the kind of architecture I can finally get behind." Clara glanced toward the girls, her eyes soft. "They've become inseparable. It's like they were waiting to find each other." "Maybe we all were," Elias said quietly. Outside, the first snow of Christmas Eve began to fall slow, tender flakes settling on the golden willow's bare branches. The tree shimmered faintly under the glow of the diner's lights, its reflection rippling in the window like a memory reborn. Luis Ortega pushed open the door, stomping snow from his boots. "Afternoon, folks," he said cheerfully. "Heard you're hosting that scholarship dinner tonight." "That's right," Elias replied. "In Miguel's name." Luis nodded, his smile broadening. He'd like that. A diner full of people. Laughter, louder than guilt. Clara's voice softened. He would. By early evening, the diner filled with townsfolk. Plates clinked, candles flickered, and the sound of a guitar hummed through the air as an old friend of Miguel's played soft country hymns. Above the counter hung a small wooden sign Elias had carved himself. "The Miguel Reyes Foundation Building Lives That Last." When it came time for speeches, Clara stood at the front, the girls beside her. Her hands trembled at first, but when she looked around and saw familiar faces, kind faces, her voice steadied. "I thought this diner was just a place for coffee and pie," she began. "But over the past few months, it's become something else, a place for truth, for second chances. My husband used to say every person carries a blueprint inside them. It's what we build when no one's watching. Thanks to Elias and to this town, we're building something good again." The room broke into warm applause. Elias rose next, but before he spoke, Lily ran up to him, clutching a folded napkin. "You forgot this," she whispered. He opened it. It was her drawing again, now redone in pen and color, with new details. 2 girls under the willow tree, a woman serving pie, and a man sitting with them at the table. Across the top, in looping letters, it read, "Forever begins here. M." Elias looked down at her, and then at the crowd. "I spent most of my life building towers," he said. "But tonight, I realized the strongest foundations aren't made of concrete. They're made of forgiveness." A quiet fell over the diner, one of those rare silences that doesn't demand to be filled. Clara stepped beside him, her hand brushing his.
And sometimes, she said, smiling gently, forgiveness looks a lot like family.
The wind outside shifted, brushing the willow branches against the window like soft applause. The night settled softly over Maplebrook, wrapping the little town in its calm, snowy hush. Inside the Golden Willow diner, the candles had burned low, and the last plates had been cleared. The laughter from the scholarship dinner still lingered faintly in the air, like the echo of a hymn. Clara stood by the window, untying her apron, watching the flakes drift down through the golden glow of the street lamps. Elias joined her, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "You've worked enough for one night," he said, setting one down in front of her. She smiled. "You sound like someone who's finally learning to rest." He chuckled softly. "Maybe I'm learning to live." Outside, the willow tree shimmered under its thin coat of frost. Its long branches swayed gently in the winter wind, scattering light across the snow like liquid gold. The world beyond the window was quiet, sacred, every sound muted by the season. Lily and Emma ran out from the kitchen, scarves already wrapped, their cheeks bright with excitement.
"Can we go outside?"
Lily asked.
"Just for a minute."
Clara hesitated, but Elias nodded. "Only if you promise not to catch a cold." The 2 girls squealed and pushed open the door, their laughter spilling into the night. Their small footprints marked the fresh snow as they ran toward the willow, their giggles carrying like tiny bells. Clara and Elias followed them out, standing side by side beneath the soft glow of the diner's sign.
"Do you ever wonder,"
she said quietly,
"why this tree seems to hold so much light?"
"Maybe because it's seen more than anyone else," Elias said. "All the people who came and went, all the things they left behind." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Miguel planted it, you know. Said every home needs a tree that listens." Elias looked up at the branches, the light flickering through them like a slow heartbeat. Then he built more than he ever realized. The girls began to make snow angels beneath the willow. Their laughter rose into the air, clear and unburdened. For the first time in years, Clara didn't shush them. She let the sound live, filling the empty spaces that grief had once guarded. Elias glanced at her. "You were right," he said softly. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about letting someone new walk beside the memory." Clara met his gaze, her breath visible in the cold. "And you were right too. We all build something that lasts. We just don't always know what it is until the end." For a while, they stood there watching the girls play, the glow of the diner casting soft halos on the snow. The sign in the window caught Elias's eye, Lily's drawing, now framed properly. Beneath the willow she had written 3 simple words. "Forever begins here." He smiled faintly. "That girl of mine has a way with words." Clara laughed gently. "I must run in the family." As the wind picked up, snowflakes brushed against their faces, cool and fleeting. Elias took a slow breath, the kind that feels like the first one after a long winter. "You know," he said, "I used to think redemption was something you earned. Now I think it's something you share." Clara reached for his hand, her voice soft. "Then share it, Elias. Every day you have left." He nodded, eyes drifting toward the girls, chasing each other around the golden tree. "I intend to." And as they stood there beneath the glowing willow, surrounded by laughter, snow, and the quiet hum of life continuing, the pain of the past seemed to melt into something gentler, something like grace. Inside the diner, the lights dimmed one by one, until only the soft glow from the window remained, reflecting the family outside, a man, a woman, and 2 children beneath a tree that never stopped listening. The branches swayed, the snow whispered, and Maplebrook slept under a sky full of forgiveness. Under the golden willow, life found its quiet rhythm again, laughter replacing guilt, love growing where silence once stood. Elias learned that redemption doesn't always arrive in grand apologies, but in the small, steady ways we show up for others, a shared meal, a gentle word, a hand held through winter. Clara found peace, not by forgetting, but by forgiving. And 2 little girls reminded them both that family isn't bound by blood, but by the courage to begin again. The heart of this story is simple. Love and forgiveness can rebuild what regret once destroyed. True wealth isn't found in towers or titles, but in the warmth of those who wait for you to come home, like a porch light left burning through a long December night, one small act of kindness can guide someone back from the dark. So tonight, as you sit by your window or sip coffee at your kitchen table, think about the people who once waited for your call, or the ones still waiting. It's never too late to make that call, to make things right, to build something lasting. If this story touched your heart, press 1 below. If not, press 0 and tell me why every story, like every heart, can always grow brighter.